Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me today to know about enriched dashboards using Microsoft Graph, Activity API, and Power BI. So this is going to be cool, and let's get on to it. A few things about the code of conduct, and it's pretty much the same. So a little bit about myself. Hi, I'm Ashish. I am in 15 years in the business, slightly little bit. I'm an architect and a developer. Build a lot of integration solutions with M365, Azure, AI. AI has been my core, but I still do a lot of integration stuff with Azure, Office 365, building solutions between. I'm a tech lover and enthusiast, and something that I normally always say is you dream it, believe it, and then build it. So that's my motto with everything that I do, and hopefully you guys will also kind of think on that. So cool. So what's the need of analytics, and why do I need it? Basically, that's the core of what we are going to talk about today. Like a lot of the time, I have seen people coming on to Office 365, started using it. They are 6 months under the journey, and then they start thinking about, you know what? I have spent so much money on licensing, building all this stuff. I don't even know if people are using it. I don't even know what people are using in it. What's the core of it? What's the use of it? There are so many tools in it. Should I be enabling everything? And if I enable some part with the other, what's the uptake of it? So this is what we are going to look at in analytics, or in kind of a way of getting the data up to its core. And we'll look at some options that are available directly and some options that you could build on. So yeah, so let's get into it. Now, this is what we want to reach there. The first thing we need to start understanding is the growth. That's why we want to know analytics, is how do we understand what's the growth like in the company. Second thing, what we want to know is what is actually needed. So we want to know how much uptake is our environment giving us, like Office 365, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange. We always want to know how much of that growth is coming into our business as we are rolling it out, and what kind of availability or support people are requiring. And then also in that is, there are so many features out there like Yammer, Stream, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint. Again, I noted only 5 main, but there are so many in it. Power Platform. What are those main things that the business are using it? Now, when we combine these two, now if we understand how the growth is happening and we know what's actually the growth we need it on and what is actually needed, that's where the ideal case will happen, where we'll see a lot of adoption happening in our company. And this is what we want to reach at. Now, to reach that, we need to know some data behind. We need to know what's going and happening on the back end, how people are using the solution. Then only we can find out how the growth is in the business or in the company with respect to the tools. And this is what we are going to look at analytics for today. So the first option in that is through the Power BI content packs. Now, Power BI is one of the suite of applications which is used for reporting in Office 365. You can use it to connect to different databases, get data, and match the data to create some interesting reports. Saying that Microsoft has enabled a way of deploying solutions into Power BI using content packs or app sources. So there is an content pack available with some out-of-the-box setup already done, and this could be an easy starting point for you guys. So we will look at some of the Power BI content pack. Now, before I drop into a lot of details, I know I forgot to mention this. The Q&A I will be doing at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, do drop up in the Q&A as you find it, and then basically we will take Q&A as we go. So the first thing is the Power BI content packs. Now, today in this session, I'll be showing a little bit of Power BI, not a lot of Power BI, just because I will be concentrating more on the data side of it. Now, there are obviously, great graphic, like the analytics designers out there who can do much better graphs. I'll show a snapshot of something, but not massively into it. I'll be showing more concentrated how you can get the data so that you can start working on it. And the Power BI content pack already has the data. So you will kind of get to see an end result of how it will look like, or how it could look like. The next part we will talk about is the Microsoft Graph Activity API. There is a lot of stuff that is happening in this end. There's a lot of things coming up in this end. Microsoft has been heavily invested on that. So we'll look at the Graph Activity API, what is available there and how we can get that information. And the next, and then the core of it is the Office 365 Management API, which has been there for long, that has all the data tracking done. This is basically for audit logs, but saying that once you get the data from the audit logs, you can span the data to make more rich analytics information that can show you growth, that can show you usage, that can show you what are the things that are happening. And it can even go to the security scenario. And obviously, there is a security API which is also now available, which has more advancements in it. But management API is kind of the core where you want to go to get more audit information so that you can track it collectively. So in all, we'll look at all these three options. To start with, let's look at the content packs and what are the content packs and what do they bring to us. So first of all, content pack is nothing but a package. It's a package that is available on Power BI, so you can take it and install it. And once you install it, you can make it available to the team members that you are working with, or to the whole organization through a workspace, or through the app, which they are calling now. So content packs are going to be renamed as apps very soon, and that's what it is going to be used as. But saying that, if you go to a tenant now and you're in the old one, you will still see content packs, or do you want to confuse people? So content packs and apps are the same, but this is just basically like a deployed module of solution. The next is you can customize this report that you get from the content packs. You get the whole report and the data set out along with it, so you can take it and then customize it. And then when you have customized it, you can then now go ahead and configure it to basically deploy, define how you want to get the data, and all those interesting stuff which you can do with Power BI. So some of the points to note and things to keep in mind is, first of all, you need a Power BI license. So you need to have one Power BI, like I say Pro license, so that you can go and design and manage very easily. So it comes with, I think, E5, or you have to get it separately. And then with E3, you get the free one, which is usage, and then you top up with Power BI packs or Power BI Pro packs. You install the content pack, so you have to install the content pack. It's not readily available. You have to go and install it and enable it and connect to the data source. And then you share it with the users and the organization, depending on if you want everybody in the organization to have it or few users to have it. The licensing obviously is impact on that. So you have to consider what you are going to use when. And then you need tenant admin privileges for the API to function properly, because the thing is, the moment you go and hit connect to your data source, there is something that happens, and I'll show you guys. There's something that happens in the backend that sets up kind of a connection so that the data can be read from your tenancy, and that will not happen if you don't have tenant admin privileges. So if you are an end user or a business user who is trying to set it up, make sure that you are making your tenant admins aware about it so they can go ahead and enable that feature for you. So these are a few key things that you might keep in mind as we are going through the Power BI solution part of it. So without further ado, let's look at the Power BI content pack solution. So this is the Power BI content pack. Let me show you guys the demo one first. So this is the demo app for the Microsoft 365 usage analytics. That's what it is called. So as you guys can see, there are multiple options in it. There is an executive summary, there is an overview. Now looking at the executive summary, it gives you kind of like overall adoption, overall usage, mobility, communication, what's happening in each of the streams. And this is all collative data. This is not actually drilled down detailed information. You can also drill down from here. You can click on one of these and it takes you into one of those detailed charts. But again, this is all cumulative data. And that's what you are looking at. So you're looking at the cumulative data that is coming from your environment and shown up into a graph chart. Now you might say that, okay, is this something? Obviously, this is just an example. So this will vary for your tenancy, but this is not something that is readily available as you start working through it. So if you are growing your business, these are some data that will take some time to grow. So you need to be looking at it. But this is a good information, high level, if you are doing a board meeting or if you are doing a catch up in 6 months to see where your adoption is. You can actually look at this and it will give you some insights of how it's happening. Now, to give you guys a more real-time example, I've set it up on my own tenancy. Obviously, mine is also a dummy tenancy, so not much happening there. But this could be something that a new environment would look like. So this is what it looks like in my tenancy. A lot of blanks. Obviously, I'm not using OneDrive so now, but this will go up. Some percentage of Exchange usage, some percentage of SharePoint usage, some usage here. You can get an overview of everything in that, the whole tenancy and look at what's happening when. So you can drill down in one of these and it will just give you what's happening, like enable and everything. And if I go to SharePoint, that is more, I think it just, again, it's a collective information. It's not detailed information. So that's what you are going to look at. How do you go about using it and enabling it? So you go to get data, you go to get, and you go to, you can pretty much search for it, or if you scroll down, you should be able to find it with the Microsoft logo. So this is the one. So Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics. You click on that one, you do get it now, and it pretty much anybody who has a Power BI license can do this part. So they gets it now, and that's it. However, once you have done it, and I will show you guys, like for example, a user, in my case, he has gone and installed the app, and now when he clicks on it, it gives you an option. Like either you can explore or you can connect. Because this is not connected, it doesn't actually have the real data. So on the other way, if you go to your workspaces or here, it will open the app and it will say connect to your data. So if you're coming from workspaces, this is what you'll see, and this is your actually management screen. You can go. I'll show you guys the new look also. So when you click at connect your app, you need to give your tenant ID. Now the tenant ID is something that you may not know, and this is something therefore you need a tenant admin also to help you. So if you go to your Azure instance, like your backend for Office 365, and if you go to your Active Directory, this is something that is available in your properties. So you can go to that, you can get your directory ID, and that's what it is looking for. So you can take this and then put it in there, and that will work. So if you want to know, this is what you are looking for. And then now don't put my tenant ID, put your tenant ID. Don't take a picture and then put that one, but take a pic, go to your Azure tenancy and get that tenant ID. Once you have done that, you click next. So for example, I will go copy this and put it here. Click next, and then it will ask you for authentication. So generally, I recommend OAuth 2 because that's the most secure, and you can do private if you're just doing it for yourself, and then you can sign in. Now, when I sign in, it will ask for this token approval. So it will ask for like, hey, do you have the necessary permissions to approve it for this tenancy? Now, in this case, I think it will find that it's already there because I have done this in my tenancy once already. So therefore, it is already there. I have enabled it so anybody can start going and installing and using it. So yeah, that's what I did. I just connected to the data and it will start popping up the information on the backend. If you go to data sets, you should see this is popping up. If you don't have the right permissions, it will give an error here like, okay, so there you go. So these are the errors. So it didn't do that. So it gives you this weird error and you are like, what's happening? I don't know what's going on. Mostly what it is saying is you need to have the proper credentials to enable the data source. And how do you do that is you go to the backend again. I need to go to my tenant account and go to Power. Sorry, I had it open. Okay. So you go to your tenant account, you go to your enterprise applications, and in enterprise applications, you will see a lot of the data sets in there. And then in that same thing, you'll see Power BI service. And if you go to Power BI service and you go to permissions, oh, not here. Wait, which one is that? Should be usage analytics something. Not seeing it. Okay. I have to look at that again. Processing. Power BI product usage. So there is a service that you need to go ahead and set up. Just kind of lost which one did I set up last time. Or is it in? No, it's here. Yeah, someone I kind of lost it where it is, but there's one of the apps that I think it will come back to me. and I will show it. The graph one is here, so you have to go, and if you are doing graph, and graph is where you have to enable the permissions here. So same thing you will do for the app. You have to go ahead and enable the permissions, and once you enable the permissions, it should start pulling up the data. So cool. So once the data is pulled, it will start populating it, and it will come up with that result set, and you can just start looking at what is making sense. Now, if you want to customize it, yes, you can. So if you go to your workspace, you go and open this, and you have the data sets on the back. So you can come here, get the data, and then work with the data set. So the data sets have all cumulative information, so you can go and drag and add a new one, and then try to do something with it. Now, saying that this obviously is very data heavy, so just keep in mind that as you're using this, you may need a better network. So this is the new look and feel. This is how it will look like if you go to the new mode. And if I come here, I can see all the data, and oh, it's not showing me. Okay, so if I go to the data reports, yeah, this is where you do the front end design. So I had created a new report, but didn't get time to finish it because the network was very slow. So you can add a new report, and you can add the graph and do some cumulative information in there once you have in the data set. So if you look at the data set, this will be in edit mode. Yeah. So why is it not? Somehow it's not coming in edit mode. So yeah, if you come here, there should be more information. Not here actually. It should be here. Obviously, I don't do it day in, day out. So and I lost where did I get to edit on this one, because there was an option here which allowed me to edit the report. So it should be somewhere here, but I'm not able to find it. Oh yeah, there you go. The new screen. Yeah. So yeah, if you go and edit, and you can find the so you can add a new tab, you can go ahead and get the data set, drop it, and this gives you the same look and feel. So the workspace kind of has almost the same look and feel as the Power BI desktop, which is, I like the Power BI desktop more because that's more offline and I can do stuff without worrying about connectivity. So that's cool. That's the Power BI content pack. So as you guys can see, you can actually go and install apps resource, and then you go and configure the app to connect to your API, ask your tenant admin to approve it, and then basically you can start using it, or actually ask the tenant admin if you want to go ahead and install it. Now, if it's a tenant admin doing it for you, and then if you want to deploy, how you can deploy is you come to your app. Once you have done the app, you go here, and then you go to access, and then you can give access to anybody, or you can go even to settings, not settings, not here, it goes from, so you go to share, yeah, that's where you go, and then here you can actually allow, you can to share with the users. So if I go here, I can add more users here, and I can share it. There is another option with content packs where you can actually go to the content pack itself. The new one, actually, I'm losing a little bit of track of where things are. So if I go here, I go to the admin portal, I can actually go and add more stuff here, and I can define which ones I want to use. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go ahead with the graph part of it. So yeah, cool. So we looked at the Power BI content packs and how you can install that. The next part is about graph. So graph has the support for activity API to the activity API that has been just latestly released, and then you can directly use that. So you get the graph API support, you get cumulative numbers. The only thing is the most it can go through is 6 months. If you want more than 6 months, you need to store the data in your data store, and that's what we look at one of the examples for that. So some of the point to note is, again, you need Azure AD app which has graph permissions with it. you need to understand that there are two parts of that permission, which is delegated and application access. So delegated, both are enabled and both are supported, but delegated means the user can only access the data that they are allowed to, whereas applicant gives them a blanket cover based on what the API provides them. So you can decide based on delegated or application level access. Then you need an API layer to host the data pool if you are going to store the data for more than 6 months, and you can actually work with different data sets. So the good part is you can actually have data coming from different tools and solutions, or you can actually look at only one data set and be interested in it. So just to give you guys a quick understanding of how it will be like. So what I've done is I have actually taken some examples, download the data and put it in Excel so we can see what the columns are for each data set. Most of the information you can get it from the graph documentation. If you go to the graph documentation, there is the reports overview where you have all the schema information, so you can give to each one of them and you can look at them. They are not very friendly, and then you're like, okay, I don't know what's happening. So what I did is I wrote a small app that will just go ahead and put all the data into a Azure storage Azure storage table. So I created Azure table and then created Azure storage container and then created a table in it, and my job just goes ahead and actually runs for 30 days, gets all the data and puts it in one Azure table. Because Azure tables are NoSQL, you can actually have multiple data sets of different, but the only thing is you'll see a lot of null, but there are a lot of data that is available. So I did export that into Excel just to show you guys how. So what I did is I created a service. This doesn't come with the API. So what I did in my logic, I had added a header which which service it is coming from. Is it Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams? Because there are different calls for it, and then which operation is it trying to track? Is it a usage? Is it the activity? Is it a file count? And how does it gather that information? Saying that to look at each of the data sets. So for example, I have the Teams data example. So in the case of Teams, you get basically what information do you get is you get something like this, like which are the devices that are in use. So if it's Android, is it Mac, is it web, which user agents mostly they are used on, so and how many times they have been used on. Like the number of calls, now obviously we cannot see it because this is a NoSQL, so the data is scattered. So if I come to team device user detail, so if I come here, I can see the name of the person. So these are my test users. And I can see if they have been using on Android phone or not, or mostly on web. So I can see some yes. That means that this guy has used it on web and not on Android or Mac yet. I can get more information about how many times they have used in the top. It doesn't come per user. That's the only challenge. So you have to do some mashing for that. And the other thing what you can get is based on another activity count endpoint, you can get the calls, number of calls that have been done, meetings that have been done, private chat messages, team chat messages. So you can get all this information from another endpoint. Now, in my cases, it's all zero because it's a dummy tenancy, so there is not much happening there. But I can see that I've done some test use cases, so you can see some chat messages coming there and some. Now, this doesn't come per user, unfortunately. This doesn't tell you which user it is part of. And that's where you need the activity API so that you can track more details. Well, the activity API even doesn't track chat messages yet, I think. So as you can see the time chat messages, you can see the meeting counts, so you can see how many private chat messages or team chat messages counts. So those were individual messages that were done each day, and this is the total count for each header on a day. So if I come here, that's another endpoint for team user detail, and that's where the data is coming from. Now you might say that, okay, I'm not knowing how it is different. So if I go to my solution, and I'm going to post it on GitHub, and you can go and look at it in my mapping JSON, I have the endpoints all located. So if I come to my solution, there is this graph JSON in resources, so you can go and see the mapping. In the mapping JSON, I have the operations and the endpoints related to it. So basically, what I'm doing is it's just a scheduler job that runs Currently, this is an HTTPS endpoint, but you can make it a scheduler even. So what it does is it just goes ahead, opens the connection to graph, and then basically after it authenticates, it goes and loops through for all of the operations and gets the data in a dynamic format, then uploads the data into Azure Table Storage. So it just understands what endpoint it needs to hit, goes and hits that endpoint, gets the data, converts the data from a CSV format. And that's the key thing to know, that the CSV that you get from graph, the response data that you get from graph is in a stream, which is CSV. So you cannot just read it directly. You have to actually convert that stream to a readable object, so you can read it again. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm getting the data in the CSV stream, converting it to a CSV format, taking the data out of it, and then storing it to Azure Storage. So that kind of data mapping allows me to manage where data needs to go. And the same thing you can do. So I'm storing it in Azure Table, which I can then use the graph. So if I come to my Power BI desktop, so what I've done is I have connected to my Azure Table Storage as a data set. And then once I have connected to that, I can now go ahead and create reports out of it. Like as you guys can see in this example, I have created currently I'm not done much with it because I didn't obviously have time to prepare, but what I've done is I've put my content services. Can I zoom this? I would hope to zoom. Oh no, it doesn't. So if you guys can look a little closer, we can see that there are different content services that I put here. So Exchange, SharePoint. So I can click on one of the content service, and it will give me the operations that I have captured on, and it tells me like how many of those operations have happened in the last 30 days. So this is for each 30 days. And then also I can see the operations that, again, this is not something coming from graph. This is just for my usage. I have named those operations in a naming format that I can understand, and I can select that operation just to know what it is, having in it. So if I say SharePoint, and then I want to see how many user counts have been. Now, the pie chart doesn't give me a lot of details, but I can see if there are 30 activities happen with the user count. So like there have been 30 activities that have happened. Now, if I go to the backend data set, the users data, again, as we were showing in the table, has a lot of nulls. So you have to filter and do measures and do all kind of, the dash programs so that you can actually filter the data and then show the right data set. If you're storing in one Azure table, but you can store in multiple Azure tables. And in that way, you can actually, have multiple data stores, and then you can collect the data and do multiple matching. Just for me, just for that demo, it was easier to put it in one table store. So cool. So to reiterate on the Graph API approach, the approach is, first of all, you need to create an Azure AD app, give the graph permission. So I didn't show that. Yes. So if I go to my that's my table store. I don't have it open. So if I go to my Azure AD app, there is only one permissions you need to give, reports.read. So if I go to my apps, so you need to create an Azure AD app. And if I go to the permissions, you need to give reports.read. Now, in my case, I've got both delegated and application, but you can just work with one, and that needs to be approved. So the admin needs to consent that and say that that is approved. And then that API endpoint you can use in your solution, get the data, store in the data source. Now, this is all needed if you are going to store the data and needs the data for more than 6 months. If you are just using within those 6 months, you can write an SPFX or PARD or something similar and do a front-end call. Just you have to handle the stream scenario. I would say then as a function, do the stream scenario, handle the data, and then use that API endpoint, convert to JSON, and then send it to your SPFX. So you can do all of that also. Cool. Now let's go into more of what we can do more. Okay, so before I go to the next, there are a few things that to capture all the activities that the Graph Activity API provides. One is the team, device, and users. So it gives you the team device and the users activities. It gives you the Outlook app, mailbox, and activity on the Outlook end. It gives you the groups, the users, and the activations that have happened on that licenses. So if you had few users joined and they have been activated within that month, you can see all that data, and you can see which groups have been created, which users are active. You can see OneDrive and SharePoint. And again, all of this data that I'm talking here is all cumulative data. It doesn't give you a whole lot of depth into it. And if you want that, that's where we will look at most of the, the Office Management API. But if you're interested in just getting the high-level count and just want to know what's happening in my OneDrive, what's happening in my SharePoint, how many people are getting it, how many calls are happening, how many chat messages are happening, you can do all of that with the Microsoft Graph API. So you can get OneDrive and SharePoint, you can get Skype for Business device, user and participant, you can get Yammer activity. Now this is all growing and there are a lot more coming in it. So you might see a lot more getting added to the Graph activity API in the future. But for now, if you're doing it, these are all the endpoints that you can hit and all the data. The most critical one and the most used one, which people have been asking me for some time now, is the Teams device and chat messages, because even with the Graph Management API, you get creation and you can get the usage of channels, but you cannot get how many chat messages, how many calls have happened. And so sometimes people have been going to CQD, call quality data, for that, and that's a little bit old and outdated. But if you are looking at Teams cumulative information, where you want to see how many people have been on Teams, private messages, chats, meetings, and you want to know if that's a user or not, then I would say go to Graph API, and then you can get all the data there, and you can just use that information. Cool. So I'll pause here a little bit. This is the QR code. Oh shit, this is the older one. My bad. This is the older competition. QR code is the last week one. I forgot to update it. So there is a new week, new one. I must have it somewhere. So just get it from the source. 5. Okay. So yeah, scan this code, and then basically you can enlist for this week's QR code competition. Just leave it for now. Go ahead and scan it. Once you have done that, we'll switch. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Hopefully you guys have got the screenshot. So that's good. Yeah. Cool. So I did the demo. We saw Graph Activity API, how you can use it, what are the things in it, and how you can make use of a data store to store the data for more than 6 months. And if you want to collect the data through multiple sources and use it collectively together. Cool. Now we'll go to the management API. Now this is the heaviest approach, and this is something that you will need to think a lot, because there are a few moving pieces in it. The first thing is the management API itself needs some setup and time, and there is a lot of effort involved in it. So you need a dev or somebody like a technical guy to help you. So you need to understand what needs to be done here. So that's the first thing. And second, you need detailed activity support. Therefore, you need, and this is something that you need to go if you are needing for in-depth report, where I want to know how many files are used, what files are used, which activities are happening on each of those, kind of like in Exchange. Is it the mailbox items are exchanged? Access. If the mails are getting sent, what mails are getting sent? If you want to know more about SharePoint, which files are accessed, which pages are viewed, these kind of detailed data if you want, or if you want to go to a site level information in SharePoint, for example, or a mailbox or a group kind of example in Exchange, that's where you need the Activity API. The Activity API is fed from the audit log. So it has a dependency on Office 365 audit log to surface the data for you. So the data is very huge. It could range from 10,000 to 15,000 records for a good tenancy in a span of hour or 2 hours. So you're talking a lot of data that you're mashing and putting into your data store. So you have to be cognizant what you need it for and how you are going to use it. But saying that once you have the data, you can do much more with it. And I'll show you guys some reports, one example report that I did. And as in this one, you need a custom data source, because the data size is so huge, there is no other way of contemplating the data or using the data unless you have a data store for it. I would recommend Azure Tables because they are cheap. You can span them as you want. data, the data schema is very flexible, so you can add information or change information very easily. So you can use Azure tables for that. So you need to have a setup and a plan ready for Office 365 Management API. To lure to that, and how do you guys set it up? I have written a few blogs already on that. So if you go to my website, there are a few blogs, and I have put the link in the slide deck. And basically, if you search for audit log, you go to my blog, ashpad.com, and search for audit log. You should see a few blogs there. One is for how do you set up the subscription service for the audit log management API. So it tells you how do you go step by step, what permissions do you need, what endpoints you need to call to start the subscription. So this is like a step-by-step guide of the steps that you need to activate the management API. Then if you are going to build a management API, it has a proper option for a office. So this is PowerShell. So these are the options. You can use PowerShell to get the data, or you can use the API, which is like, the endpoint part of it. So you can use PowerShell also, but that is Exchange Online. So you have to have a session running on your end, and then you can get the data out. So you can use PowerShell, but that is Exchange Online. So you have to have a PowerShell session running, and therefore it cannot be unattended. But if you want unattended job-based process, then you can use Management API. And in Management API, basically what you do is you have, so I've done this another blog, and I have a GitHub repo all there. So you can go and look at the GitHub repo. The code is already there, which is actually getting all the SharePoint audits, maps them to a proper activity, and stores it. So you can look and go through this blog with more details. I have, updated that with more steps. So you can go and look at the code, some snapshot of the code and what the code does, and how does it match with the CSV helper and Azure table store. So there are some examples. You can go through it, read it. If you have some feedback or questions, post on it and I can answer them. So this is high level about how you can go and set up management API. But before we go into a little bit of that, few call outs for that is, first thing is you need to start, and these are also in my blogs, but the first key thing you need to do is start the audit log in Office 365. So by default, it is turned on for most of the tenancies, but if you're a demo tenancy, or if you didn't think it's like a production environment that you created, it will be turned off. So you need to turn it on. So there is a setting. If you go to say Security and Compliance Center, audit logs, there is a setting, and in my blog, that option is given. So you can go and turn it on. Once you have turned it on, it starts tracking all the data and bringing it for your tenancy. Then you need to subscribe for the logs. So that's the step that I was showing in my blog about subscription. So you need to go and subscribe for those logs from the management API, and that's where you start the subscription for your end, for your job. Then you need to have a periodic job to store the data, because the data is so huge that you cannot actually contemplate on a real time. So you need to store the data in an Azure table somewhere, so you can actually match the data later. And again, you need tenant admin privileges, because this is working on API that needs admin privileges. So you need tenant admin privileges to work on the API. Cool. What type of logs can you get from it? And these are more in-depth. So this I'll show you guys the data set, and that's really fascinating. And I really like it when I see it. I'm like, I can get this, I can get that. And the use case that I built it for initially was, the use case was a company did want to know what files are shared externally. Now, there is no log out there, or there is no activity, at least from my knowledge till now, that can give you only the external shared files and who they have been shared with, so you can track on them. So for that reason, I had built this thing a couple of years ago, because that's how we could track. And basically, it was giving me all the email addresses that the shared files were given, and we could track it in a store, and then allowed those users that, hey, go ahead and take permissions out if you don't use it. So basically, it was going to be used for a governance requirement and audit requirement, but the data was coming from here. So you can do Azure AD activity logs. You can do SharePoint and Project Online activities. It gives you both the headers. You can do Extend admin and mailboxes activities. You can do DLP and Security and Compliance Center. Obviously, I'll say that the Security API has more endpoints and more stuff, so do look at that. But this one also gives you Security and Compliance and more detailed ones. Then you have Teams, Power BI, Forms activities, and this is very high level. but this is where you can go and see how your Power Platform is used, how your Microsoft Team usage has been happening, if people are creating teams or not, are people using forms or not. This all data is helpful for you to look at the whole breadth of suite and services that Office 365 provides, and how your company is using it, and gaining the strength on it. And then you can also do Yammer activities, so you can see what Yammer activity is happening, what people are doing. You can get more details in it. Okay, cool. So in that end, I will show you guys a little bit about the schema, because you guys feel like, okay, wait, I can do a lot of stuff, but what kind of schema am I looking at? So this is again a link in my documentation, in my slide deck. You can look at it later, but this is all the schema that is coming with the management APIs. So there is this API schema tab, and you can keep scrolling, and it gives you, like, you can keep on scrolling. It's so long. So you'll be really happy if you are a data analyst and want to look at the data, what you are gathering. Once you look at it, you will be like, oh, this is good. I can do a lot of stuff with it. So do that, and this is the scaling schema that I used, where I could know who the target user, and gives you the email and what kind of user it is, and what kind of activity they are doing. So this is really cool. And this was also the steps for setting it up, but I would say go to my blog, because there are some steps missing in it, and you might be figuring it out what's happening. If you go to my blog, I have detailed those steps, so you can look at it and understand what needs to be done. There is also this reference, which you can look at what. So with the activity API, there are different endpoints that you need to hit to get the data. Audit.SharePoint is pretty relevant. That's for SharePoint. Audit.Exchange is for the Exchange. Audit.Active Directory is for Active Directory. Audit.General has Teams, Forms, Power BI, everything included in one. And DLP all is obviously for DLP. For DLP, you need a separate API permission access. I have not shown that in my blog, but if you need that, you can go and add the DLP access in the Graph API, in the API permissions of an Azure ADI. So these are the steps, but you can look at my blog and you should be able to relate how you want to use those. To give you guys a quick snapshot of what it will bring and what I could have done, what I've done with it. So this is kind of an example. Again, not much of a time to build anything, but I've shown is what kind of content. Then this is only for SharePoint. So what kind of content operations that are given in that period in my tenancy. This is again my tenancy, so not much activity happening. So what I have done is the operations that Microsoft is. Now this is again a filter set of operations. There are about 40 or 50 odd operations there, and my code I have filtered out a subset of it because it was just too much. It was just too much. So the records were going in my client case at least for 20,000 something. So I was like, okay, I cannot get all the data. So what I did is I did a mapping where I could filter the operations that is of interest for you. So you can do that. So you can see there are these operations like file access, file checked in, file checked out, file modified, file extended, like very detailed, and you can look at all of them. And if I click on one of them, it can show me like, what's happening. Anyways, and the data is very scarce. So I just have 400 or 120 rows. So not much data there. What you can see is the content side. Now, the thing is with the sites, it comes in GUIDs, but I have done some mapping with the URLs, but the URLs are not coming correct. So I have put the GUIDs here, but you can always do the mapping. In my code, I have done that also, where I have taken that GUID and get the SharePoint URL. Now, one point to note in that is, I think till now the CSOM still works with Azure function 1.x. It doesn't work with 2.x or 3.x as the current level of code has been. I've not looked at for 6 months. Maybe that has been an update, but from my experience, it works with 1.x, so SharePoint framework, or sorry, .NET framework. So use .NET framework when you create the Azure function, and that is Azure function 1.x. So you can use that and then, use that library. You can hard code it in your code when you're building in Visual Studio, and then you can update the Azure function backend also, if you're going that way, basically. So yeah, so you can get that GUID and you can do that. It gives you the agent platforms. So this is the web versus, the phone versus, so this gives the which content people have been using. So as you can see, this is a web, this is OneDrive. So people have been using OneDrive. This was a mover, I was trying mover. So it is there, the Word and Delve. So these are the hits that have happened. Now, if I look at, also I can get the list. where the hits have happened. So if I look at file modified, I can see which files have been modified in which list. So this is cool because you can not only get the operations, but also the list that the operations. So you can go to a level of the site, to the list, to the item, and you can see all that operations happening. So you can just get the data and mash it as you want. Now looking at the data as such, now the data is much refined in this case because I had the code ready. So in this case, it is much refined. So as you guys can see, it has correlation ID, it has creation time, it has the event source, the content ID, the type, the list name, the list ID, the URL, and then you basically have the organization, the record, again the site URL, the file types. This is really critical and interesting. You can get page names and something. You can get the list names. You can get the users. You can get the agent. You can get so you can get the website also. So you can get the website GUIDs and the website name. So there is a lot much in there that you can contemplate and use it. Some of them are coming from the management API, and some of them I have mapped them. So if I look at my code, which is there, just to give you guys a quick snapshot. Do you want to close it? Okay, so to give you guys a quick snapshot in my code, if I go to the main root one, so there is a little bit of patching. So what I've done is right now in my code is I've modified it to loop inside the function. But if you're doing a job, the job obviously can run every 5 minutes or 1 hour or whenever. I was just doing it for the load, so I've looped it inside my function and my scheduled job function. But what I'm doing is I'm getting the time zone. You need to provide the time from where to where you need the log from. You cannot be more than 24 hours. You have to put it within 24 hours. The duration cannot be more than 24 hours. And the total duration cannot be more than 7 days. So if you decide today that I want to start tracking, I cannot go back in the activity API beyond 7 days. So if you want to cumulative start doing it, start now, so you can start preparing the data in another 3 months, so you can look at the data. Yeah, so you can go back 7 days, and that's why I got on the 120 record hit, because I cannot go beyond that. So if you are trying to do that, start it now. So in the API, you can only do it once for 24 hours and only for 7 days at once. And also the thing is, when you do the API hit happens in 2 calls. The first call, which tells you the initial URL for the detailed data set. So you will see in my calls, there are 2 calls. One is the initial data, which gets you the initial URL, the content URL, which gives you more details about those operations. So first is to get the URLs, and the second one is to use the URL. So if I run this, so it will run fine. You will see it will get the request like 8 or 7 chunks of requests, and each of the requests will give more data out of it. So if I run this is running on my local, so it will just run and it will just fetch the data. One or more others. Oh, I know what. Because I was trying to see if I can go beyond 180 hours, which is like, beyond 7 days. I was not able to. So I'll just start it again. It happens because it's a scheduled job run as a function. Sometimes doesn't trigger the localizer function. Don't do that. It takes me about 2 or 3 tries to get it working again. Scheduled jobs have that issue. I don't know if it was issue with 1.1 or is it continuously being an issue. Okay. Doesn't. Okay, if it doesn't work, that's fine. But you can see the initial request. It shows like, okay, I got 7 requests. Okay, there's something else wrong with it. Okay, I don't have time to debug. So what it does, it goes into the back. It gets the initial set of requests, like which is like 7 or 8 of them, based on what period you are looking for. Is it a 20-hour period or a 12-hour period? It will give you those 8 or 7 chunks, and then in each of the chunks, it will give you more details. So the code does that already, so you don't need to worry about anything. I'm just giving some information who are going to build it themselves. they need to know this, that they have to do it in 2 chunks. So once you do that, you get the data, you patch them so that you can go do multiple. Don't sequence them, use durable functions or something where you can parallelize the work, because you are getting about 10,000 records at once. So you're just going to make best use of parallelism in there. So go and do a parallel call, get the data out, and then store it in Azure table. Once you store it in the Azure table, it will look something like, in my case, it looks something like this. So I've done some analytics also, which gives like which operations I have included, which operations were excluded also. So it should give me an excluded operation soon. So none of the operations were excluded. But if I show you guys my code, if I go to wrong solution, if I go to my audit operations, no, this is the mapping for the activities. So the thing is, it gives codes in some cases. So I've mapped them what do those codes do. So if a user type is 4, it means a regular user type is 3 means something. So if you go to my code, the audit operations.json has all the operations. So you can just add more operations and you just start tracking them. You don't need to do anything. The code already is built in a way that once you add more operations, it will start pinging. And if you want all operations, then pretty much you have to, change the code. But otherwise, if you start adding operations, it will bring all those operations in, just to make the code more efficient, because it was just taking longer and longer. And then I have activity mappings in there. So if I go to this method, which is this is where I'm doing all the SharePoint mapping. So I go get the ID and then go to SharePoint. So for this one, you obviously need a username password of SharePoint. So you need admin username password, or you can encrypt in Key Vault and then use that to get the data out. So as you guys looked at it, just high level, and there's another thing I would love to show you is that besides the data mapping, if you're not doing the data mapping, this is how your data will look like. So this one, I have not done any data matching. I just got the data and I've just pulled the data here. If I look at the backend, if I look at here, the data is very raw. So this is exchange data and it just comes in like client rest. You get this kind of nested folders, which is like, oh, folder items, this was accessed. This is how you access. So you need to do some matching and just build the data out of there. And then also there are some cases like you get grids, so you're not actually understanding what the user is doing. You get operations, but you don't know what the operation is about, so you need to drill down a lot. And then you can actually do more, smart activity. So it gives a lot of data, but it's a nested data set. It's not like it's flat at one level. It has more subsets of data. So you need to do the data matching and mapping, as I've done in my code. So I've done the data matching here. I think I've actually negated those nested data sets. My code doesn't take care of that. Cool. So you can take this data, put it in a table storage. The code is already there. You can look at it, and then basically use that to start from the management API endpoint of it. Cool. So quickly, these are all the helpful resources. So again, very high level, all the helpful resources that I have used, and you can use. And I put my blog link here. So I'll give it a little bit pause if you guys want to take a picture. Do that. But yeah, so you can go this, and this one I think the slide deck will be shared on my blog. So if you go to ashishparty.com, you can see the slides there, and it will have more details there also. But yeah, cool. So finally, I want to say thanks to our sponsors for organizing this M365 and the M365 team for taking so much effort, staying longer hours with us, and making the sessions happen. So really thankful to them. But yes, and all the organizers for organizing this and making this kind of fantastic events possible. Cool. Finally, thank you to everyone for joining today. I suppose the Q&A is open already, but if not, the Q&A is open. So we have 5 minutes for any question and answers. Okay, cool. I suppose, otherwise, thanks for joining. And thanks for organizing the session, Lauren. Thank you.